Good evening. Today is Sunday, June 21st, 2026. I'm Rich Stevens, and this is The Cold Take. What you're about to hear is news from the week ending June 19th, taken only from primary sources like press conferences and court documents. You can find those sources and attribution for every story at thecoldtake.com. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, but especially to my dad, who bought me this tie 30 years ago. I went with my dad to a local clothing store called Jacobson's, where his dad had shopped for suits and shirts, and when I saw this tie, I loved it. I said, "Dad, can I have this tie?" And he either looked at the tag or asked me how much it was and said, "I'm not buying you a $50 tie." This was 1996 and I was 14, but I wore a tie to school every day. And I don't remember what he was getting for himself, but he wore a suit to work every day, so probably a suit or some shirts. And before he left, he picked up this tie and put it with his stuff. It's silk and has a little toothpaste stain from decades ago now, but I still have it and it's still my favorite tie. This is the first time I'm wearing it on the show, and Dad, when you see this, I love you and happy Father's Day. We begin in Washington, D.C., where this week, outgoing Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard released several tranches of declassified records. The documents challenge years of official statements about U.S.-funded biological research, Ukraine laboratories, COVID origins, Anthony Fauci, and the Wuhan Institute of Virology. In 2021, the intelligence community said it remained divided on the origin of COVID-19 and considered both natural exposure and a laboratory-associated incident plausible. In March 2022, the Department of Defense said its biological threat reduction program had invested about $200 million in Ukraine since 2005, supporting 46 Ukrainian laboratories, health facilities, and diagnostic sites. DoD said the facilities were owned and operated by Ukraine, supported disease detection and biosafety programs, and were not part of a biological weapons program. Gabbard's new releases challenge those earlier public statements. On June 12th, ODNI released documents it says show past U.S. government funding for more than 120 biolabs in more than 30 countries, including Ukraine. Their slide deck says Ukraine had more than 40 labs built and supported with U.S. assistance. Repositories there contain disease-causing pathogens including anthrax, tuberculosis, MERS, SARS, Ebola, plague, and others. Another slide lists 4 Ukraine labs with U.S. government investments ranging from about $1.7 to $3.5 million per facility. A third slide says the U.S. paid a Ukrainian scientist to study highly pathogenic avian flu and other infectious diseases in U.S.-funded biocontainment laboratories. On June 18th, ODNI released a second package focused on COVID origins, Anthony Fauci, and the Wuhan Institute. The release includes emails, reports, scientific publications, intelligence records, and Fauci-related materials. ODNI alleges Fauci funded risky coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, influenced intelligent assessments related to COVID origins, and misled Congress about contacts with intelligence officials. ODNI also says whistleblower material has been referred to the intelligence community's Inspector General. The intelligence community says it has not reached a consensus on the origin of COVID-19. In 2023, ODNI said the Department of Energy and FBI assessed a laboratory-associated incident was most likely, while other agencies either favored natural origin or said the available evidence was insufficient to reach a conclusion. On Sunday, June 14th, 12 people were killed when a skydiving plane crashed shortly after takeoff from Butler Memorial Airport in Butler, Missouri. The Pacific Aerospace P-750XL was carrying a pilot and 11 skydivers. Bates County officials said the aircraft took off around 11:20 in the morning, failed to gain altitude, made a sharp left turn, and crashed about 300 yards from the runway. Skydive Kansas City confirmed that all 12 people aboard were killed. The National Transportation Safety Board is leading the investigation with assistance from the Federal Aviation Administration, and as of this recording, investigators have not released a cause for the crash. On Tuesday, June 16th, federal prosecutors in Minnesota unsealed an indictment charging 15 members and associates of Direct Action Minnesota U.S. Attorney Daniel Rosen said the group conspired to disrupt immigration and customs enforcement operations during Operation Metro Surge. Prosecutors allege members used vehicles, RV trailers, road obstacles, homemade shields, surveillance teams, and stalking tactics to block law enforcement activity around the Whipple Federal Building near Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. The indictment includes charges ranging from conspiracy to impede federal officers to assault, interstate stalking, interstate threats, solicitation of violence, and destruction of government property. Rosen identified the Black Hat Workers Collective as an Antifa affinity group connected to the investigation and said one of the organization's leaders, Kyle Wagner, publicly identified himself as Antifa. Federal agents arrested 12 defendants Tuesday morning. One was already in custody and 2 remained at large when the indictment was announced. On Wednesday, June 17th, Rex Heuermann was sentenced in Suffolk County to 3 consecutive life sentences without parole plus 100 years. Heuermann pleaded guilty in April to 7 charged murders and admitted in court to killing an 8th victim. He's responsible for the deaths of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, Sandra Castilla, and Karen Vergata. The murders spanned from 1993 to 2010 and involved victims whose remains were found across Long Island, including Gilgo Beach, Ocean Parkway, Fire Island, Manorville, and North Sea. On Wednesday, June 17th, federal prosecutors in Washington, D.C. announced a 21-count indictment charging 14 defendants in an alleged crack and cocaine trafficking conspiracy near Hindley Elementary School. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro said the operation ran in Washington Highlands, within 1,000 feet of a school serving pre-kindergarten through 6th grade. The defendants are charged with conspiracy to distribute cocaine base and powder cocaine near a protected location. Investigators recovered 2.4 kilos of crack, 1 kilo of powder cocaine, 29 grams of fentanyl, 12 pounds of marijuana, and 28 firearms. Interim Metropolitan Police Chief Jeffrey Carroll said MPD began the investigation in late 2024 after reviewing violent crime and narcotics activity in the area. Pirro also said she will ask the D.C. Council to add a child endangerment statute after showing surveillance images of an alleged cocaine sale near a 5-year-old child. As charged, the defendants face anywhere from 5 years to life in prison. On Tuesday, June 16th, the Justice Department announced charges against 5 men in an alleged plot to attack UFC Freedom 250 at the White House. The FBI learned of the threat on June 10th and made arrests over the weekend in Ohio, Missouri, Nebraska, and California. The alleged plan was to use drones armed with explosives around the UFC event, force an evacuation, and then use snipers to fire on, quote, high-value targets in the fleeing crowd. One suspect allegedly told investigators the group began communicating around March and later moved serious planning to an encrypted chat app. Searches tied to the case recovered rifles, handguns, ammunition, magazines, tactical gear, and other equipment. You know, when I started the Cold Take, I didn't have this beard, but it really grew on me. Happy Father's Day. Hit like and subscribe. Share this with your dad. In world news, on Thursday, June 18th, Toronto police announced the arrest of 19-year-old Zara Jabi in connection with the March shooting at the U.S. consulate in Toronto. Police say 2 suspects fired multiple rounds at the consulate on March 10th before fleeing. People were inside the building, but no injuries were reported. Toronto Police, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and Canada's Integrated National Security Enforcement Team treated the shooting as a national security incident. Jabi's arrest follows the June 11th arrest of Sheldon Tracy Stewart, who was also charged in the consulate shooting investigation. During a separate search warrant connected to the broader investigation, Constable Mark Pinizzato was shot and killed. Toronto police say Nicholas Bennett was arrested and is expected to face first-degree murder charges in the officer's death. Moving over to finance, on June 16th, SpaceX filed paperwork with the Securities and Exchange Commission to acquire Cursor, the company behind the AI coding platform of the same name. The all-stock deal values Cursor at $60 billion. The filing says Cursor had already granted SpaceX an exclusive option to buy the company in April. SpaceX exercised that option before signing the merger agreement and expects the acquisition to close during the third quarter of 2026, subject to regulatory approval. The agreement also includes unusually large termination fees. If the deal fails under certain regulatory conditions, SpaceX could owe $4 billion. Under certain breach or failure to close scenarios, that fee rises to $10 billion. On Wednesday, June 17th, Kevin Warsh held his first press conference as Federal Reserve Chair after the Federal Open Market Committee voted to leave interest rates unchanged at 3.5 to 3.75%. Warsh used the meeting to announce 5 task forces that will review Fed communications, balance sheet policy, economic data, productivity and jobs, and inflation frameworks. He said the Federal Reserve is abandoning forward guidance for now and repeatedly emphasized that the central bank will return inflation to its 2% target. Warsh also declined to submit his own economic projections, saying he remains skeptical of the current forecasting process. Happy Father's Day to all the dads who've never admitted to being tired while actively falling asleep with the TV on. Hit like and subscribe. Share this with your dad. He'll probably appreciate it. Markets continued last week's trend, with the Dow Jones picking up 0.71%, a 362-point gain, closing at 51,564. NASDAQ saw a 629-point bump, representing a 2.4% climb, to close at 26,517. The S&P 500 closed at 7,500 on the button, almost a 1% gain after adding 69 points. And gold continued to fall, losing 1.6% and closing at $4,172 per ounce, a loss of $67. And in sports, on Sunday, June 14th, Lewis Hamilton won the Barcelona-Catalunya Grand Prix in Spain for Ferrari. Hamilton finished 19.5 seconds ahead of Mercedes driver George Russell. Lando Norris finished third for McLaren, making it the first all-British Formula One podium since 1968. Ferrari used a 3-stop strategy, and Hamilton gained his final stop under a virtual safety car after Fernando Alonso retired. The win ended Mercedes' perfect start to the season. Kimi Antonelli had won 5 straight races before Barcelona, but retired on lap 62 with a mechanical issue. The Carolina Hurricanes won the Stanley Cup on Sunday, June 14th, beating the Vegas Golden Knights 3-0 in Game 6. Carolina went 53-22-7 in the regular season, finished first in the Metropolitan Division and the Eastern Conference, and then went 16-3 in the playoffs. The Hurricanes swept Ottawa in the first round and Philadelphia in the second, becoming the first team in NHL history to sweep each of their first 2 best-of-7 series on the way to a conference final. They beat Montreal in 5 games, then Vegas in 6. Jordan Staal won the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP. In Game 3 of the final, Carolina also scored 3 goals in 39 seconds, the fastest 3-goal stretch in Stanley Cup final history. Go Hurricanes. On Sunday, June 14th, UFC Freedom 250 was held on the South Lawn of the White House. The event opened with a Super Delta flyover featuring both the U.S. Navy Blue Angels and the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds. In the main event, American fighter Justin Gaethje defeated Georgian-Spanish fighter Ilia Topuria by 4th round TKO after Topuria's corner stopped the fight between rounds. Topuria entered the fight as roughly a 5-1 betting favorite and was undefeated in his UFC career. The win made Gaethje the undisputed UFC lightweight champion. President Trump attended the event alongside UFC President Dana White. Woo. The 2026 World Cup is 2 rounds into group play, and the United States is in a strong spot. The U.S. opened with a 4-1 win over Paraguay, then followed it with a 2-0 win over Australia, giving the Americans 6 points and the top spot in Group D through 2 matches. Elsewhere, Mexico and Canada are off to strong starts, Brazil and Morocco are level at the top of Group C, and several of the European favorites are just now getting into the heart of group play. The U.S. can lock down the group with one more result when it faces Turkey on Thursday, June 25th at 10 p.m. Eastern in Los Angeles. In Major League Baseball, Jacob Misiorowski continues to break his own records. He threw 47 pitches over 101 miles per hour in Friday night's loss to the Braves. Even so, the Brewers sit 5.5 games atop the NL Central. Atlanta has lost some ground but has a 7.5 game lead on the Phillies in the NL East, and the Dodgers command the NL West by 9.5 games. In the American League, Seattle is just a half game up on the A's in the West, and in the Central Division, the White Sox are even with Cleveland, 4.5 games ahead of the Twins. The Yankees have a 3-game advantage over the Rays in the East and are the only AL team with a win percentage over .600. Finally, the Men's College World Series is down to 2 teams. The Championship Series begins Saturday in Omaha with the University of North Carolina facing the University of Oklahoma in a best-of-5 series for the national title. North Carolina reached the finals by winning its bracket without a loss, including 2 victories over West Virginia. Oklahoma advanced through the other side of the bracket with wins over Alabama and Georgia. The tournament field included 5 Southeastern Conference teams, along with North Carolina, West Virginia, and Troy. By the final week, only North Carolina and Oklahoma remained. One of the most memorable moments came Wednesday during Georgia's elimination game against Oklahoma. Georgia shortstop Colby Branch and Oklahoma second baseman Kyle Branch became the first brothers to start against each other in a College World Series game. In the 9th inning, with Georgia trailing, Colby hit a home run in the final at-bat of his college career. As he rounded the bases, he exchanged a high five with his brother who was standing at second base. After the game, Colby said, quote, "It's a good moment. High-fived him, which is kind of cool, and then I wished him luck in the national championship." Now, Kyle Branch and Oklahoma move on to face North Carolina for the national title. That best-of-5 series kicked off last night, June 20th, and I'll bring you updates next weekend. And like it or not, that's what happened. I'm Rich Stevens, and this has been The Cold Take. Well, I have a confession to make. I only know 25 letters of the alphabet. I don't know why. Happy Father's Day. Hit like and subscribe. Helps the channel grow. Remember, kids, the tongs don't work unless you click them a couple of times before you take them out to the grill. Just ask your dad. He knows the deal. Hit like and subscribe. Share this with your friends.